Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Weird Wednesdays. Tattooed Biker here with you. And tonight we're diving into the spine-chilling real-life encounters that occurred within the haunting halls of hospitals. Prepare to be captivated as we venture into the eerie unknown and unravel tales that will send shivers down your spine. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and enjoy a ride into the paranormal. Number 1. When I was a child, I had spent several years in and out of the hospital with childhood cancer. I'm in my 30s now, been in remission for over 20 years, but I don't really remember a lot from that time. Occasionally, memories will reappear that I can't make sense of. This one has been particularly unsettling that I keep revisiting. I want to say I was 8 years old when it happened. My parents alternated staying with me there, but my mom had to leave for a couple of hours, so I was on my own, wandering the pediatric ward with my IV on a large pole. I don't remember how, but I ran into a boy my age in the neighboring wing and we talked about video games. We looked around for a TV on wheels with a gaming system and eventually rolled it into his room. I remember asking questions like how long he's been there and what he was in for, but he always gave really short or vague answers. I asked where his parents were and he said they were back at work already. However, when we got to his room, there were no personal possessions and his bed was made like it was freshly reset. I wasn't thinking of anything much at first, but I plugged in the TV and the gaming system and started to feel uneasy. He sat on the bed and told me I can play first, while I sat in a chair near the TV and kept the door open. We both had IVs. I thought mine was fully charged, but then it started beeping that it needed to be plugged in. Since the cart didn't have a power strip, I looked around for an outlet. I asked him if he needed an outlet for his, and he responded that he doesn't need one anymore. I suddenly got really uncomfortable and decided to leave, and he just looked kind of unfazed as I left the room. I had thought I knew all the children in my ward and the neighboring ward, but I never saw him before or again. I asked my parents and the staff, but nobody seemed to know what I was talking about. He had brown hair and was slightly chubby, but he didn't look pale or sick like the other kids. I don't know if he was just a strange kid, but the fact that nobody else saw or knew him kind of stayed with me. I remember hearing crying from the ward at night after the children had checked out. I wonder now how much of that was my imagination, or if there was something paranormal about that hospital wing. Number 2. In 2020, at the beginning of COVID, I had only just given birth. At this time, I could only have one other person in the room with me my entire stay at the hospital. Of course, my kid's father was there, but like the third day, he left to clean up our house and get everything prepared for me and baby. I had gotten sick and had a C-section, so I had to stay for about 4 or 5 days. Well, while he was away, a nurse named Kelly said she'd be helping me throughout the day and spending time with me, so I don't feel lonely while the dad is gone. I couldn't really hold my baby due to me being sick and the pain from the C-section, so my nurses would come in every time it was time to feed. I noticed when they came in, they wouldn't acknowledge Kelly, and she would go to the furthest part of the room, and she would tell me I'm just going to get out of the way. Now, she did tell me that she didn't specialize in what they did, and she was just for comfort. So I didn't say anything. The entire day, she was so helpful and encouraging to me. I really believe I would have broken down if she wasn't in there with me. She was such a sweetheart. Well, after about 5 or 6 hours, she told me she had to leave and that she would come visit me before her shift was over to check on how I was doing. She hugged me and blew a kiss at my baby and walked out the room. Later that night, the father came back and he was very upset. He had told me some stuff happened with his mom and that he was sorry that he took so long. I was upset, but I told him a nurse named Kelly kept me company. As I'm telling him about her, my nurse is changing my sheets, and she's like, "Who's Kelly?" I explained, and she said that nobody named Kelly was in my room or working that day. So I instantly thought about those women who would pretend to be nurses and kidnap children. But my nurse told me that I may be hallucinating, and she told my doctor. I talked to my doctor, and he said the same thing. Well, a couple of hours later, a nurse that I didn't recognize came in my room and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but everyone on the floor is talking about you seeing Kelly." I said, "Yeah, she was here with me for like 7 hours today, and she helped out a lot." We're smiling and laughing while I was telling her about Kelly and how sweet and funny she was. Then she pulled up her phone and showed me pictures of her and Kelly that looked to be maybe early 2000s. I was smiling, knowing that I wasn't hallucinating. Then she sat down and told me Kelly died over 10 years ago from a domestic violence incident with her boyfriend. I wasn't too shocked because my entire life I've been dealing with the paranormal. But I got chills because I never had an encounter this deep. Well, the lady gave me a hug and started crying, saying, "Now I know that she's okay." Since that day, I've been wondering, why did Kelly come in my room and help me? I kinda wish that I could see her again. Number 3. Dear Biker, I'm on mobile, so apologies. English isn't my first language, so sorry about that too. About 3 years ago, I was in the hospital. It was the psychiatric wing, which already made me uncomfortable, but nothing strange happened before this. They moved me to a new room, and for the first time, I didn't have to share it with anyone. The first day went smoothly, and I get ready to go to bed. I turn off the lights, lay down, and face the wall. After a couple of minutes of trying to fall asleep, I feel something touch the top of my head. I start to panic and quickly turn my head around. There, next to my head, is a woman with long black hair and no face. It wasn't blank, but just covered in shadows. Her skin was gray and pulled taut against her bones like paper. I'm terrified at this point, and I sit up with my back against the wall, but suddenly the woman is gone. I couldn't fall asleep for the rest of the night. One of the nurses notices that I'm still awake and chats with me for a while, and eventually I fall asleep. The next day, I ask if someone could be moved in the room with me. A girl I'm friendly with gets moved into the room with me, and the nurses start giving me sleeping pills every night. I never saw the woman again after that, and I hope I never see her again. Number 4. When I was 3 or 4, I fell pretty violently down the staircase in my family's old Massachusetts Victorian home, and my parents took me to Bay State Children's Hospital, just one town over in Springfield, Massachusetts. I just had a busted lip from hitting the wall on the way down because it was one of those staircases that turns and then continues downwards. But my parents were concerned that I hit my head, so despite my crying and protesting at the idea of going to the doctors, they took me anyway. I remember being absolutely terrified at the idea of possibly needing stitches in my lip, so I cried the whole way there. The one good thing I remember about this place was the big playroom they had in the regular children's hospital unit. However, the children's ER only had a few of those bead toys on wooden box with the squiggly plastic bits to slide the beads on. I don't remember what they're called. I sat down in front of the toy and started sliding the blocks and beads around the loops and turns of the plastic. And then a boy started talking to me. And when I looked up, he was on the other side of the toy. I remember being surprised as I had never seen him before. And I had never seen gore before. The most gore I had ever seen was when my parents were scrambling for the remote while we were watching The Simpsons and Itchy and Scratchy came on. The side of the boy's head was cracked, completely open. And as I took in his injury, a strange scent hit me. Sort of a sickly sweet smell, but it was barely there, if that makes sense. I was a very anxious child, so I tried my hardest to hide my uneasiness. I smiled at him and continued to play. I remember he asked me, "What happened to you?" And I answered that I fell down the stairs. Then I asked him, "How did you get your boo-boo?" gesturing towards my own head. He answered simply that he fell, and we just kept playing. At the time, I thought he was a boy that I knew from school, as he looked slightly familiar, minus the cracked open head, so I felt comfortable with him after a few minutes. We chatted about how we were both afraid of being at the doctor's and of being hurt from whatever the treatment might be. That's pretty much the end of the memory. I got medicine on my lip, and they checked my head to make sure it wasn't hit during my fall. Then a month or so later, there was a fire drill at my school. We were all lined up in the parking lot, and I spotted the kid, who I thought was the one in the ER with me. But to my surprise, his head was perfectly intact. Not even stitches or a scar. His hair growth was also completely uninterrupted, and I knew that the doctors would shave down the hair to treat the wound. In that moment, I basically just shrugged it off as my mistake. It wasn't that kid. So finally, a few years ago, when I was 20, I brought this memory up to my parents, and they had no idea what I was talking about. They remembered my fall and the trip to the ER, me playing in the waiting room, but not any boy with a cracked open head playing along with me. They said if his head was as damaged as I described, he wouldn't be in the waiting room, just hanging out. When they said that, my adult brain processed the memory again, and I was basically like, oh yeah, what the hell? Then I remembered the smell that emanated from him as we talked and played. I kept trying to place it as the smell of infection, or maybe just the dried out inside of his wound. But then I remembered where I smelled that before, just much, much more strongly. When I lived in Okinawa, Japan, as a preteen, there were a ton of stray cats everywhere. One day, I went on a walk with my class at my international school. It was in basically a rural Japanese neighborhood, and lots of farms around. As we walked up this one hill, the boy leading us started gagging and groaning, and the rest of us just laughed because we thought he was either messing around or just being dramatic, but then the stench hit us. I'd never smelled death so strongly like that before, and my eyes literally watered. We hesitantly made our way to the top of the hill in search of the source of the odor. We noticed a red-stained bag hanging off a low branch on a tree, and the boy who originally smelled it quickly dashed over to peek into the bag and then ran back gagging. Apparently, there were 3 dead, bloody cats stuffed into the grocery bag and unceremoniously hung up. It was through the memory of that smell that I identified what the scent of the boy in the ER was. It was the tangy, sweet, rotting smell of putrefying flesh, just like a watered-down version, so it was almost unnoticeable. Number 5. Dear Biker, firstly, I would like to say that this is not my story. It happened to a friend of mine for whom I'm trying to help find some answers. I was recently hospitalized for respiratory, lung, and chest issues. I was given my own room that was a private room, but very isolated. As I know now, the ward I was in was specifically isolated for COVID patients. The moment I was submitted, the air in the room felt heavy. I just assumed it's because I was tired and really didn't want to be there. Saturday night, I was waiting for the nurse to put my IV back into my arm as it gave me problems that morning and was removed. Around about 10:30 p.m., I was falling asleep when I was suddenly awakened by what I thought was a nurse or some man that was trying to steal my phone from the table next to me. Upon looking at what's next to me, my room light switched on and I saw this pitch black man looking thing in a crouch position, running from my bedside towards the bathroom. An elderly lady had entered my room to use the bathroom, assuming it was her room. After visiting hours Sunday afternoon, everyone left and the atmosphere felt heavy again. I didn't mention the black shadow figure, as I assumed it was just my imagination. Around about 11 p.m., I ended a chat and decided I was going to try and sleep. With that said, this weird sensation came over me to just pray for my family and make sure that they were safe. I was lying on my stomach with my right hand under my pillow and my leg bent when suddenly I felt this bat-like creature. This man was pinning me to the bed. I could feel its body pressing me down. I tried to scream and move, and after struggling, I managed to turn myself around. And what I saw, I hope to never see or experience again in my life. It was a thing with wings and a face like a bat or a gargoyle. I managed to turn and look again, and this thing just sprung and disappeared. I stayed awake the rest of the night, crying, hoping to never see that again. I booked myself out of the hospital the very next day. I would like to know what that thing was and why it did what it did. And there it is. All I have for tonight. 5 bone-chilling stories of paranormal encounters within hospital walls. I hope you all found these encounters as fascinating and eerie as I did. Remember, these encounters are shared by real people, and they remind us that the veil between our world and the unknown can sometimes blur. If you enjoyed the video and want to hear more unexplained and unsolved content, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. It's completely free and it really helps out the channel. So thanks again. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you soon on down the road a ways. Biker out.